Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, Phil, it's past the midway point of September, the plate change. I don't know about you, but I'm hearing sort of mixed views on the way the market's going. You know, there seems to be interest out there in the market, but sales, as we record this, aren't on fire. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I think it's a similar report. I think there's it's a mixed picture. I think is probably the best way of describing it. I think some of the manufacturers are doing okay in relation to their expectations. I think they did reasonable in terms of an order bank coming into September. I think some of them are struggling. We'll get on to some of those manufacturers that there might be reasons why they are struggling a little bit in the market at the minute. But some have got strong targets. You know, their expectations for September is quite a strong target for the network. So I think the general view is we are going to get some, let's say, last minute activity again, Curtis, that we like to talk about in the closing days of September. And I suspect we'll probably be dominated by EVs, but I'm sure we'll get to talk about that at the time. When we get to the figures.
As we touched on last week, that the order book for the Ford Puma EV is looking particularly good at the moment. So, if there's any Ford dealers listening to the pod, it'd be fascinating to hear what sort of response you're getting, because that is still the only car that qualifies. Well, there's two Ford vehicles that qualify for that upper tier £3,750 grant.
Yeah, and there is, if you look in, if you do get the Auto Market Insight report from Tristan and Richard Elcott, I mean, there's a lot of incentives on the table now for EVs. You know, it's a key month for the sector. It's a definer for where they're going to potentially land in terms of the ZEV mandate for the year now. So there is a lot of pressure on the manufacturers for this month. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. One where the month finishes in totality, but two where it finishes by fuel type. But hopefully next week, as we get towards the closing days of the month, that we've got obviously somebody on that might be able to give us a bit more of a steer as to where they're seeing it for the month.
Yeah, definitely on the used car side of the market, because we'll be catching up with Jeremy Yeh from Cap HPI next Friday. So that interview should be in your podcast feed next Friday. And it'll be Jeremy giving his assessment of how trade values performed over the course of September. And of course, we always ask him to forecast what he's expecting for the coming months. So his take on the final quarter is going to be quite interesting from the September viewpoint.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. And obviously, he'll hopefully give us a view as to what his expectations are as we head into the final quarter of the year. That's a key output that we'll hopefully get from that conversation.
And you've been busy with your VRA Vehicle Remarketing Association hat on, because you've got the summit coming up on the 19th of November at Warwick University, and you've just announced the speaker lineup, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's becoming a big event of the year now, that down at, as you say, the slate at Warwick University this year on the 19th of November. Expectations that we'll get, another nearly 200 delegates, guests, colleagues from across the sector. I mean, the key with this is a free to attend event. But this year, we've done something slightly different this year. We've segmented it into sort of four areas, four key subject topics, and having more of a discussion, a debate, a fireside chat. So I'm going to be having a fireside chat with some of the guests, and that will be followed up by a panel discussion on the same, obviously, sector. So looking at that retailers, the remarketing sector, thinking about those remarketing strategies. But I think as you say there, we've got a fantastic lineup of guests coming for that event this year.
Yeah, you have, and some of whom have been on the podcast, because I notice Michael Dunn, the analyst from Dunn Insights, is joining you. He's dialing in from the States, I assume.
Yeah, actually be in Asia that week,
Oh,
I
right.
believe.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that technology is on our
Yep.
side. So yeah, we're hopefully going to be I'll be having a chat with Michael whilst he's tour in Asia, and getting the latest from Michael on how he's seeing the global EV market, and in particular those Chinese manufacturers. And talking about Chinese manufacturers and friends of the podcast, I'm going to be having a fireside chat with Victor Zhang from Amoda and JQ. So Victor and I are going to be, shooting the breeze, having a conversation for 20, 30 minutes as well at the event.
Yeah, no, that'll be great because, as you say, Victor was on the podcast and he was really, really good. Very switched on, very knowledgeable, and he actually shared a lot, didn't he? Because that was in the early days of a Motor and Jayco. I think it was around the time of their launch, and he did share a lot of information about what they were planning to do, the sort of network size that they were after. So, I mean, he'll be able to give a great update on where they are now and where they expect to be over the coming years.
Yeah, he's always good value. He's always, like you say, he's always a good open conversation with Victor. So really looking forward to that. But as you say, Curtis, I mean, it's out there now in the market. I've shared it through my social channels this week. It's through the VRA as well. Registrations are now open. I think we've had a third of capacity already booked to attend the event. We won't go through all the guests, but there's you've got things like people like Duncan McPhee from Hendy's, Chris Bond from BDO, Vicky Hart from Wayland's is joining us on the day. Jackie Barker, you'll know from Keyloop, plus
Yeah.
many others joining either fireside chats or as panel guests. So it's going to be a long, fascinating, insightful day. And we're doing a little bit on AI as well, but we're still working on that and some live battery testing. So that should I've tested myself this year for technology and content. So yeah, it's going to be a good event.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
Companies already featured in our supplier specials include iVendi, ETT, Prospecting Dynamics, Tracker, Jigcar, Checkvic, and Car Care. You can find them all in your podcast feed. And if you would like us to profile your business, then just get in touch with Philip or myself. We're both on LinkedIn.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from Car Dealer, AM, Auto Sunday, Motor Trader, BBC News, and This Is Money. Starting with Stellantis UK is preparing itself for a £37 million hit ahead of the FCA's car finance mis-selling redress scheme. JLR could face disruption until November following this month's cyber attack. Half of dealers say the electric car grant is providing a useful boost for EV sales. However, an AA survey finds car buyers are still not ready to switch to EVs. Dubai-based DBX Investments has acquired Harwoods JLR sites as it targets further growth in the UK. And we'll finish this week with the latest franchise group year ends from Listers and Gravels.
So as Kurt said there, we'll head off over to Car Dealer to begin with, and this is that Stellantis UK sets aside $37 million for the motor finance mis-selling scandal costs, and this is that the latest accounts show that Stellantis UK has put a provision in place for $37 million for the car finance scandal. Car maker joins a growing list of finance firms bracing themselves for the compensation hit, and that Watchdog FCA is currently consulting on industry-wide redress scheme. So this is we talked about this a little bit last week, didn't we, from the Financial Times release, talking about sort of the number of finance agreements that they believe are going to be taking part of this redress scheme. But I mean, this is starting to accelerate a little bit, because we talked a lot, didn't we, about the finance lenders, but now this is moving into that franchise OEM space.
Yeah, definitely. So what we reported on last week was the FCA estimated that up to 14 million car finance deals between 2007 and 2021 will be covered by these discretionary commissions, and a significant proportion will be eligible for compensation. And the redress scheme, the FCA said the proposals for the redress scheme are expected as soon as next month. So we'll have a clear idea of what the redress scheme will look like and what the timeline will be. But this particular report that was picked up in the Nationals as well, it's interesting because it's an OEM, obviously, with a lot of brands and a lot of exposure. And within the report, Stellantis is quoted as saying the company has recognised a provision of £37 million in 2024 for discretionary commission claims, having considered a number of different scenarios and using a weighted average of scenarios. So the bean counters at Stellantis have been incredibly busy there. They've put aside this money because they know the redress scheme is coming, and that they want to be in a position where they're prepared for it. And they do go on to say that the provision is deemed to be management's best estimate at the end of the year.
Yeah, they put some calculations into this, haven't they? Because they talk about key sensitivities include the nature of the scheme, as in the full redress or customer complaint-led, time periods, commission model, compensation interest rates, and assume excess commission levels. And that they, if we stress the most sensitive assumption by 6% plus or minus, the provision could change by 3 million. So you get an idea of sort of the size and scale, and obviously the flex that this could have depending on which direction it goes. So I think it will be interesting to see if we see anything else from any of the other OEMs start to come out as on the back of this one.
Yeah, definitely. And the piece does actually end with an update from the FCA this week, because it announced that it started working with influencers. Don't you just love the term influencers? on a £1 million campaign warning customers of the dangers of using claims management companies or law firms to access its compensation scheme, because the FCA is saying that you don't need to do that. You know, there will be a process in place, so don't go through the claims management companies, which is a good move, but they're investing some money in that as well.
We could be influencers, couldn't we? So sticking with OEMs and financial pressures on the manufacturers, and heading over to BBC News, and this is a story that's continuing to hit the headlines as information gets fed. But this JLR could face disruption until November after the cyber attack, and this is that the Jaguar Land Rover has told suppliers that production at its factories will not resume until 24th of September at the earliest, following a series of the cyber attack. But industry sources have warned disruption could last into November. I mean, this is huge. I mean, this is, down tools, everything stops, can't pay for anything, can't get paid for anything, no vehicle movements, the lot. I mean, this is a huge impact to JLR.
It's massive, isn't it? And within the piece, it says the shutdown is believed to be costing JLR at least £50 million a week in lost production. And that equates to the loss of 1,000 cars a day that aren't being made. And, as we record this, we're now we're now nearly 3 weeks into the shutdown, and it is massive because the ramifications for the supply chain, for companies, for workers, it's just getting worse and worse, really, by the day. And the big problem facing JLR is the restart. How does it get everything in place to restart production? Because its vehicles pretty much are all bespoke. They're all bespoke orders. So there's the complexities of getting the plants up and running again, both in the UK and abroad, are monumental, really.
You've got to feel, I mean, as you say there, the reliance in the area on that factory and for the workers and the income and everything else. And as you say, that tier 1 to 4 supply chain that just cannot do anything. Yeah. And even now you're hearing from the dealer network, where customers think that the dealers have shut, that there's nothing going on. And it's having a massive impact. I mean, you just think about September as a key month of the year. The profit per unit for both new, used, and after sales with the Land Rover dealers across the dealer network, they just can't do anything. And that is going to have a massive impact on the retail dealer network as well. And say, just hearing this anecdotal notes this week that, reports that consumers thought that dealers were shut.
Yeah.
And the dealers have had to sort of, communicate with their customers that they're not shut and that they are trying to do what they can with used car operations to satisfy demand and get through September. So this is a huge thing that's starting to appear from this. But as you say, once it's been resolved, the startup of this, where those cars were in the process, where the parts are, you name it, that's got to start up again. And it's going to be a huge impact to the sector.
Yeah, and it's not covered in this particular story, but also the cars being serviced in the dealer network because they can't get hold of parts at the moment. And, the ramifications of that, cars being in, customers want their cars back. Some of those cars, the work would have been started on. So it's an absolute nightmare to sort this out.
Yeah, so we'll keep you ahead of this as we hear it. It's been things slowly leaking into the media from JLR. So we'll keep an eye on this one. But heading over to AM Online and talking about the EV car grant, and this is that half of dealers say the electric car grant is useful boost for the sector. Now, this comes from the most recent September start line car tracker, where they polled 60 dealerships and 301 customers, showed that 43% think that anything that makes electric cars more accessible is a good idea.
Yeah, it's it is an interesting this piece of research this because it says that however 40% say a lack of access to chargers is a bigger barrier to adoption than affordability, whilst a further 32% believe the environmental impact-based banding system used to calculate the grants is too complex, which is something that we've reflected on the podcast. Other data within it shows that 28% think the initiative could push electric car residuals down further. 25% would prefer to see a similar scheme designed to support demand for used EVs, and 20% believe that the grant does not cover enough models. So quite a few caveats there around the electric car grant. It's okay. The overall headline is that it's providing a useful boost, and it probably is opening conversations that wouldn't have happened otherwise. But is it delivering what it needs to help with the transition? That's another matter.
Well, we'll find out in not so long, will we? So
Yeah.
when we get the new car figures for September,
Yes.
after obviously what we saw in July and August. But as you say, positively, it's new money, as we've talked about a few times on the podcast, and Steve Young agreed that it's good money, it's new money, it's created price in the new car market. It's just how much is it going to move the dial? What impact does it have on used EVs and residual values is going to be the question. But we'll be back after this break with a little bit more on EVs and then some dealer updates.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed.
So next headline is from This Is Money, and it really does follow on from the story we were just talking about, which was very much the sort of dealer's perspective and that sort of cautious welcome to the electric car grant. But this is a story that's based on a survey carried out by the AA, and the headline at This Is Money is Britain's still not ready to switch to EVs because the right conditions haven't been met and significant barriers remain. So fairly detailed headline as ever there from this is Money. But
I'm expecting anything less.
yeah, exactly. It's definitely worth having a look at the story because it is very detailed, as is the actual research, because it's research of 15,000 drivers. And this is for a new quarterly report produced by the AA under the title UK EV Readiness Index. So they're going to be monitoring this on a quarterly basis. So it will be fascinating to see how the dial shifts from quarter to quarter. But the initial one shows that this initial readiness rating only only actually reached 47.5 out of 100. So that's how they're actually rating it once they collate all the information, all the answers. And this is really showing what buyers are thinking at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and as I say, I mean, a very detailed survey there, and it will be interesting, as you say, through time how this is. But saying that 2/5, 38%, said that not even with discounts applied to new EVs are too pricey. A quarter stated that they will never buy an EV, while a fifth told the motoring group that they will only buy a second-hand motor, which makes the ECG grant redundant to them. So mixed messages coming out of this one, especially compared to the previous story we covered, because this is looking at consumers.
Yeah.
Their attitude towards the ECG grant and that discounting.
Yeah, definitely. And it goes on to say that just 5% said the grant has increased the likelihood of them making the switch to an EV, and only 1% of the panel admitted they are already buying an EV and want to use the grant. So, yeah, there's still a long way to go. And I think it does reflect some of the complexity around the electric car grants. It's not straightforward, and it does ask an awful lot of car buyers to get their heads around what qualifies for the grants and why and what doesn't.
Yeah, and there's a nice little statement here from Edmund King, who's the AA president, that drivers tell us they're excited about going electric and they love the tech, but they're also confused and cautious, which kind of sums it up quite well there, that there is they say a bit of excitement to transition to an EV, but there are some challenges and some barriers there for them to get their head around.
So heading over to AM for the next story, the headline there is AM 100 Group sells JLR, BMW, Mini and Volvo dealerships to Dubai investors. Well, this is the story about Harwoods. In fact, what it's doing is it's selling its Jaguar Land Rover franchises, as well as authorised repair operations for BMW Mini and Volvo to DXB Investments. Now, DXB Investments are a new name to the UK. They're a Dubai-based business, and this will be their first acquisition in the UK, so that they hit the ground running with a pretty sizable representation there for JLR.
It is, yeah, and I think Harwoods have faced some challenges over the years in terms of their financial performance, which is reflective of some of the others that we're going to talk about shortly on the show. But as you say there, this is DXB, which is owned by the Al Gandhi family over there in Saudi. Some serious money behind them, and it's their debut to the UK market there. As you say, they're straight in, probably not the best time maybe for buying JLR franchises.
No.
But then again, there's not a lot happening, so they've probably not got a lot to deal with, have they?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, because I think you always with these kind of things, when you get a company like that, and I think it's cited in the headlines this week that they're not going to stop. This isn't kind of buy a few businesses; it's what they do next and what their ambitions are and where they're looking at expanding. So this is going to be an interesting one, and we did wonder how many activities and M&A activity we'll get in the UK once we've got the Supreme Court announcement, because that was kind of, I think, putting things on a bit of a back burner until they knew what they were going to handle with that.
Yeah, and this particular deal, it covers Jaguar Land Rover sites in Basingstoke, Chichester, Brighton, Crawley and Croydon. So Harwoods operates across the southern counties, and they will be rebranded as South East Motors. So that'll be a new name to the UK, whilst Harwoods will retain its sizable Audi business, as well as representation with some of the luxury brands, including Aston Martin, McLaren and Bentley. But there was an update to this story that was published by Auto Sunday over the weekend, because it said that in their report, it understands the aim for this new group will to become one of the UK's top 20 retailers. So, following on from what you were saying there, Philip, this is a foot in the door. This is the first step. We can expect to hear a lot more from DXB or South East Motors. They will grow some scale in the UK. That is very much the intention.
It is, yeah, and there's a nice little finish in the previous story there with Archie Harwood. Said at the time that as our manufacturer partners implement changes to streamline its dealer structure, these closures reflect the necessity to adapt into evolving market and retailer. These decisions are not taken lightly, but they are essential for the future success of the business. And, Harwood's founded in 1931 by Wallace Harwood, the father of the current director, Guy Harwood, and grandfather of chief executive Archie Harwood. And the group has significantly grown into an established family-run dealer group that's sat in currently in 30th place in the AM 100. So it's a big business and been going a long time as a family business, that one.
So we'll finish this week's pod with a couple of financial reports from two of the bigger franchise dealer groups, starting with Motor Trader, where the headline is "Higher costs and inflationary pressures see listers' profits fall 19% to £14.9 million. So this particular report really focuses in on the higher costs and inflationary pressures, which saw pre-tax profits take a hit in the year to March 2025, as I say, down 19% to 14.9 million. But turnover was actually up 2.2% to 1.34 billion. The year saw a 4.8% increase in the number of vehicles sold, with new vehicle sales up 3.8% and used vehicle sales up 6.5%, along with an increase in after-sales turnover of 8.2%. So we can see how turnover has increased across sales and after sales, but it's really those costs that have hit the profits for the year.
Yeah, they do say that the additional activity during the year and the inflationary pressure have resulted in an increase in headcounts and costs across the business. And just to give a bit of context to that, Listers employ 2,283 people in the year, and that's up from 2,183 in the prior year. So, they've added more people, national insurance, minimum wage costs, inflationary pressures coming in, obviously, has put a little bit of pressure on that profitability. But going over to Car Dealer and the final story of this week, and the Car Dealer Gravels post reduced profits, but bosses back firm to bounce back in 2025. And this is the Dealer Group Gravels published annual accounts for 2024, announcing a pre-tax profits fall by almost 40% despite a rise in turnover for the year. But directors say economic forecasts indicate an improved position for 2025.
Yeah, and it's a similar story, isn't it? Because the pre-tax profits of £3.1 million in that 12-month period, and that figure represents a decline of almost 40% compared to the previous year, when the retailer made 5.15 million before tax. And the firm was actually the highest riser on last year's Car Dealer Top 100, and it jumped 46 places to the number 55 slot. But while profits may have fallen in these accounts, turnover did actually improve significantly, rising from 130 million to 147 million. So again, reflecting the impact of costs on the business over that period.
Yeah, so it seems to be, like I say, it's that familiar story. It's going to be interesting when we do get eventually onto the 2025 performance figures of how this changes. Are we going to be talking about the same, about profit down, turnover up kind of conversation as dealers continue to face those cost pressures, which will be interesting. So quite a few stories there for this week. Hopefully some big ones there, obviously, with the impact from the Supreme Court DCA now playing into the OEM manufacturer space a little bit. Obviously, the JLR, the cyber attack at JLR continues to evolve and obviously adds financial pressures to the JLR business and obviously those that represent the brand, whether it's a supplier or an aftermarket or retailer, which isn't good. And as I said in the story, it's not good for the employment in that area as well, because the area are heavily reliant, aren't they, on the JLR factory for jobs.
But that's all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. We're back with Jeremy Ye's review of September's trade values and cap HPI. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.